We're cloning people. Have you walked around the mall? Like literally, when you walk around the mall, you'll see three women, friends. Everyone's highlighter is in the same place. The contouring is exactly the same. The nose looks exactly the same. And the lips look exactly the same. Everyone's headed to looking like each other. I'm like thinking God made us different for a reason. So why are we trying to now become exactly like each other?
Our guest on this episode is making sure you're dressed to the nines. Sima Ved is the founder and chairwoman of the Apparel Group, one of the largest retail groups in the Middle East. If you're a fan of fashion, the chances are you've purchased something from the Apparel Group, with favorites like Nine West, Aldo, and Calvin Klein, to name a few. In fact, the multi-billion-dollar company hosts a staggering 85 brands across 2,300 stores in 14 countries, with over 24,000 employees. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Homegrown DXB, the show taking you inside the lives of the people changing yours right here in Dubai. I'm your host, Omar Butti. And I'm very excited to have with me on the show today, Sima Ganwani Ved. Thank you so much for being here. Of course, the founder and chairperson of the Apparel Group. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to talk about your tenure in the UAE. I mean, the show's called Homegrown, and you're certainly someone who's been here actually longer than I have as well. And you've had left such an incredible mark, on the UAE and on the region and the world. You first arrived, I believe, in the UAE with your father in the 1970s.
I did. I was here back in about 1975. I was born in Africa and I grew up in Dubai. Back in the 70s when, I think the Trade Center was built around 1979. So it was the tallest building and the furthest you could look at in that landscape. So yeah, back then my entertainment was on weekends to go watch the Maktoum Bridge go up and down as the ships went by. I remember on weekends, my father, when it was cooler months, my father and my mom would take us, all of us as a family, so many cousins, to a water tank, and I think it was in Dera or Sharjah, which was surrounded by sand, and that was entertainment. So now when my 11-year-old, with everything that we have from Dubai Mall to anything else that you can think of, when he says he's bored, you can imagine my reaction. So I'm like, I just want to take you back to the 70s and show you how simple it was, and yet it was fun, and we were never bored.
I mean, I think that's something, it's generational, right? Like I have my kids also complain about being bored all the time, and I think, and I'm talking about the 90s in my case. I'm like, well, we had, so much less, right? And every decade is like that. But talking about that sort of the businesses at that time, because I want to get into your first job and obviously how you moved into the Apparel Group. But in the 1970s, the 80s, what kind of businesses were thriving? Tell me a little bit about, your father's business. Lal's, of course, well-known household name here.
So he came basically from Africa to set up Choithrams. He was working for Choithrams supermarkets at the time. And after having done it for about, I think, 5 or 6 years, he decided to do his own thing. And that's when Lal's came about. And I grew up watching my father every weekend take me down to some supermarket and the aisle, randomly and manually checking expiry dates, because there was no AI, there was no technology, there were no barcodes. You did everything by hand. So I watched the man grow that chain, become the retail tycoon that he was called back in the 80s and the 90s. And then, of course, he ventured into franchising. He started doing British Home Stores. He started doing brands out of the Far East, Bossini, a lot of different ones. And that's what gave me my exposure to retail on a really massive scale.
So you yourself, your first, official job was, I think, a manager in one of your father's, shops or malls, rather. Was that something that you at the time imagined, okay, I'm going to do my studies, I'm going to come back and work, in the family business? Or is that something where you thought this is a good way to get a little experience before you had the same sort of entrepreneurial bug that your father had?
So, Omar, it's really strange. When I was reading this question of yours, I was actually thinking back to the time, and I was wondering, was that like a really smart ploy or a move by my father, the way he did it? Because he literally, so first I had to fight to go to university because he said to me that none of my older cousins had really gone out of the country for a university. And I was like, well, I get good grades and I get similar grades to what my brother had. So if he had the opportunity to go, I should too. So he kind of said, fine, I'll let you. When I finished university, he literally called me, I think the day of my last exam or just the day after, and said, I have a job for you. But if you want it, you have to be here in the next 7 days. And now that I'm thinking about it as a parent of 3 kids, and thinking that was really smart because knowing, children who are coming from affluent families, there is a tendency to say, oh, I've worked so hard for 3 years. Now I'm just going to take it easy, maybe go on a good holiday to Europe, etc. He didn't give me an opportunity. So I literally ran back to get this job as a manageress of the children's and ladies' wear at Lamsi Plaza, the first Lamsi Plaza, which was near Al Nasser. And he let me work from the ground up. He literally sent me into the warehouse. I was tallying, like I said, there were no barcodes back in the 90s as well. So he was making me tally the stock that came on the order sheet with suppliers from various parts of the world. It was hard work. It wasn't easy, but it was great because I got to learn how it's supposed to be done from scratch. And I'm not sure if he had the plan that followed. However, thanks to him, then I had the courage to actually set up my own retail company.
So tell me about, I guess, where that inspiration came from, or when that moment came where you're like, because you were there, you were working hard. I'm sure there was some satisfaction, obviously, in a job well done. But what made you decide, you know what, no, I'm not going to continue, whether it was at the Lamsi Plaza or into the family business, but I want to have something of my own?
So it wasn't really a conscious decision on my part, but it was the result of a decision on my family's part, primarily my father. He felt it wouldn't make sense to have me and my brother in the same business, especially with a husband involved on my end. So he kind of said to me very nicely that, I don't think you could be a part of my business anymore. I did take that a bit hard, and I said, okay, fine, I'm going to show you what I can do, kind of thing. And eventually that's what led to the creation of Apparel Group. It wasn't some well thought out strategic decision that I want to be at this point in my life or have this in my life. It was literally the result of maybe possibly I could say today honestly trying to prove a point to my family, but
I'd
also
say you proved a point.
Thank you. I think they think so too, which is really sweet. But I think also at the same time it was about survival. I think financial independence for any woman out there is so incredibly important. And luckily for me, my father gave me a taste of it. So because I had a taste of what it felt like to have your own salary, have your own money kind of thing, I think I kind of cherished that independence. And I felt that I never want to ever be dependent on anyone else again. So that's what really led to Apparel Group.
So what were the first days, first year of Apparel Group like? As you said, it wasn't something that was well thought out, at least at the time. How did it start?
So we requested my father, and he helped me get a sub-franchise of a brand that he was doing called Bossini, which is a sort of a sportswear t-shirt and shorts brand from Hong Kong. We started with that. We went on to get a few more brands. I even did a jewelry store. Except for Bossini, Chicky Duck closed. The jewelry store was a disaster.
Why was it a disaster?
I think we were catering to the wrong audience. We realized very quickly that you can't cater to South Asians when India or Pakistan or anything else is within a 2.5-hour flight. So it's very easy to imitate pieces that they would see with us and go make them back home. So, and of course, the cost is different. So I think it taught us quite a few lessons of who should become our target audience, and listening to the customer and listening to the evolving needs of the consumer, as well as watching the landscape. Because we realized when we traveled for the buying of Chicky Duck to Hong Kong, I was pregnant, and Hong Kong is full of hills. So I had to change shoes, and I hadn't brought a pair that worked for those hills. I hadn't realized. So I ended up walking into Nine West, which I knew from my trousseau, from my travels, and I bought, no pun intended, but 9 pairs of shoes. And my husband looked at me and said, why are you stocking up? And I was like, because they don't have the brand in Dubai. And that's where the penny dropped. That's where he sort of said, wait a minute, what do you mean they don't have this brand? Because he's not a shopper, he wasn't a retailer at that point. So that's when we started with approaching international brands and understanding that the GCC was now open and ready to receive them. So we had to convince, of course, the Americans, the Canadians, and everyone else, but we first had to show them a map to let them understand where Dubai was and where we came from. Because for them, everything in the region was one big region. They didn't understand the nuances of being in Dubai versus being at that time in Saudi or in Kuwait or in Oman, Bahrain. They had no distinguished differences for any of the countries. So that's how we started then our journey with the international brands.
And how did you make that, I guess, first approach? You had the light bulb moment or the penny dropping with Nine West. Do you just reach out to them? Do you, and like, how do you start those conversations, especially if they don't even know where you're calling from?
Absolutely. So we kind of like, my husband got the name of the international director. This is a time when there was no internet, there were no Google searches, there was no LinkedIn. So he literally went up to the store manager and said, I want to take this brand to Dubai. What do I do? She, of course, looked at him completely blank, like, what are you talking about? Then he said, okay, can you give me the number or name of your main head office? Convinced the woman there. He got the name of the international director. Actually, they didn't even have an international director. He just got some name in their office. And he started emailing them. And that's how I learned the lesson that you don't sit back if someone says no. Because, of course, the first time around, they were like, we're not interested. But then you keep pursuing. He flew down to see them. And I remember that 1 month where he was, I think, in New York 7 times rather than, so he was there every 3 days just to convince them to do business with us.
How many times would you say you've heard no over the course of your career?
I think it's too many to count, but you know what? The yeses were way more.
That was my next question. How many no's turned into a yes? But I assume most of them, right? So then, obviously, Nine West had a huge mark here, very well known as sort of like one of the first big brands, associated with the Apparel Group. How did the next brands, because now you're at 85, which is an incredible number, how did the next few sort of fall into place? How did you decide which ones to pursue?
So honestly speaking, it's very much a word of mouth. When you have a great experience with a partner, especially in a country or a region where you are not well versed with the laws, with the people, with the customs, with the consumers, it helps to have that person on ground who understands all of this. So I think the brands along the way learned that we did such a good job with Nine West that actually we had brands either recommending us, referring us, or knocking on our door. So it just literally, I would say, snowballed into a lot of brands just saying, okay, we want to come with you. We want to come with you. And that's how we got to 85 plus brands now in 14 countries.
And obviously it's the Apparel Group, but you do many things. You have F&B, you have many different verticals that you cover. Again, was that something that just happened organically? Was it something where you were thinking like this is the right time to diversify into these other sort of verticals of retail? What prompted, I guess, going in from apparel, clothes to like F&B, for example?
I think for us, it's an alignment between our vision and the evolving or changing landscape of the countries that we work in. And I think listening to your customer really leads the way. Like if you think about it, right, the F&B industry now in the GCC, I think is expected to hit $54 billion by 2025. The beauty industry, out of which the GCC is the fastest growing in the beauty and personal care space, it's going to hit about $15 billion by 2026. When you look at these numbers or you think about them, it would make sense to try and enter into these different spaces or areas. And for us, luckily, because we had things like Cold Stone, Tim Hortons, and then Jamie Oliver, and a lot of these other ones, it gave us the confidence that we can actually even start creating our own homegrown version of these F&B brands. And that's what we're doing now.
Well, I understand that. You're looking at a target, I think, is it 20 or 20% local brands to incorporate over the next 5 years, if I'm not mistaken?
The next 3 to 5 years.
3 to 5,
yes.
Fantastic. Why is this the right time for that in your mind?
So, with what happened with COVID, right, we all learned the supply chain and logistics issues that you can have when one country shuts down and everyone's dependent on that one country. But we also learned that people have become, for want of a better word, more nationalistic. We're more country proud. We're all more country proud. So whether it's now Syria, opening up, or it's like what happens in Saudi now with the changes, we all want to experience something that we can relate to. And no matter how many American, Canadian, French, German brands I bring, at the end of the day, if I speak to someone who lives in Dubai or lives in this region, they will always feel that connectivity to a brand that's created here. Like if I look at my friends Huda and Mona, the brand that they created, Huda Beauty, like it gives me goosebumps, for two girls to come in and just create this amazing, incredible homegrown beauty brand. That's what I would love to possess. So I think, and also why not? The talent that we are now creating here through the universities or the affiliations with well-known world universities gives us access to a whole talent pool that can help us create these brands. In the early days, you didn't have that, but today the generation that's coming into the region or growing up in the region is so active with AI, with technology and research and development that I think it warrants the need to now have brands that stem out of the GCC and are exported internationally.
I mean, there's a general consensus, not so much I'd say in our region, but sort of globally, that, retail or like physical retail spaces are a little bit on the decline, right? But a lot of what we're talking about, we're building these homegrown brands. Some of it obviously is e-commerce focused, but a lot of it are like the physical brick and mortar stores. What is your take, obviously, as someone who's been in this industry for so long, as to that shift? Is that something you are concerned about here in the UAE? Obviously, we have malls. Malls are still very popular, but do you see that still a similar sort of effect happening here that we've seen elsewhere?
I think physical stores are still going to exist, and I think they're still going to be very relevant to us. The only thing for me that will change is the way they are relevant. So early on, they were relevant as actual sales stores. We would count the sales per square foot for these stores. Now, I don't think that's going to be a parameter anymore. I think they're going to become more experiential and immersive, whereby they are more about the touch and feel of the product rather than actually buying the product. That's how I see it changing. And I think with the phygital store that we have for 6th Street, we're seeing more and more customers inclined to use that. So I don't see physical stores dying out. I just think their purpose will be reinvented.
So you mentioned when you first started that you had to show the executives you were pitching to Dubai on a map. When did you notice that shift happen, right? Because now, obviously, we're fortunate that everyone knows Dubai, or Dubai is from the global name. Like, when did you feel like we reached that critical point where it shifted from, I need to tell you what we're doing and why it's good and why we're well located and situated, to people actually coming to you and pitching you on selling here?
Honestly, I don't think it took very long. I mean, we started Nine West in 1996. So I would have to say by the time we touched, I think the year 2000, early 2000, 2003, 2004, I think we were done. Like Dubai had established itself already as a city that you had to keep an eye on.
And is there anything in particular to your mind, having built your business here, that you think makes Dubai specific or unique or different in terms of a place to start a business?
I think the ease of doing business, and the fact that the visionary leadership of the country is forever willing to listen. They're willing to listen to the entrepreneurs, to the business community, and they make sure that they have think tanks created that help them strategize further for the next coming decades. I think that power of listening to what your people really want and what could be done better is what we really need to teach everyone else around us.
You mentioned 6th Street, of course. I want to talk a little bit about the launch of 6th Street. I think that one thing, if I remember correctly, over COVID was a difficult time for all retail, every business really. I think you had 2,200 stores that had to close down. And I think that also prompted some of the shifts and then the new sort of direction that you're taking. I guess tell me both about the launch of Sixth Street and then sort of its evolution to where it is today, taking into account all these shifts in the market?
So I think Sixth Street was live 3 years before COVID hit. But of course, it was something that we thought we need to get to at some point in life. We never thought that COVID would sort of catapult us into such a urgent need to have it perfected, which is what happened. Whatever we did with Sixth Street in 3 months, in my view, would have taken us 3 years, but we managed to do it in 3 months, and it proved to us that even the customer is changing. The customer no longer wanted to buy the way he or she did. So that kind of alerted us that we definitely need to improve this channel, because we want to treat it as one more way of selling, rather than thinking of it as, oh my god, it's e-commerce, it's, you know, it's online, it's different. It's actually a part of us, and we're actually still in the process of internalizing Sixth Street to a point where it becomes, in our minds, just another, for sake of a better word, another store. And that's what it needs to be. It needs to be basic hygiene, where it has access to all our stock and can sell anything and everything. But it has the benefit of having endless aisles, which our stores don't.
So how do you sync that up then? How do you sync up the store experience that obviously customers have gotten used to here with the online experience and make them feel like they're part of the same, whole?
I think, of course, click and collect is one of the ways. Being able to return at the store, even if you've bought it online, vice versa, is one of the ways. And just making it possible, even at the storefront level, for the salespeople to start showing people online what they're missing out if they don't have a certain product in their size or their style or their color. So I think just kind of blurring those lines of online and offline, and making sure the customer gets used to it and gets comfortable with it. That's going to be our winning point later on.
I wanted to talk to you about a couple businesses. I think your daughter's launched Nissa, the beauty line, and then also F5 Sustainable Fashion. Was it something where they approached you? Did you want to get them involved sort of in the family business? Obviously, I'm thinking as well, what you sort of said about how your father, maybe, very specifically helps, prepare you or try to, get you into the position to succeed. Is that something you think about with your own daughters? Like, are you trying to prepare them for this line of business, or is it something where they were just really excited about it?
So to be honest, F5 was something that just sort of germinated out of my daughter's desire to do something for a school project. And the school project just got bigger and bigger and bigger, and it took over. And
it's a pretty big school project.
It is a pretty big school project, and she's still at it, and we're still at it. So it is our first 100% sustainable organic brand.
Sorry,
and
what was the initial pitch for the school project? I'm just curious.
So the initial pitch for the school project was she was going to make these. Okay, so I'll backtrack. So we took her to India for one of our family celebrations. It was my parents-in-law's 50th anniversary. So we went to this tiny little temple in the north of India, and I said, the kids have to go to a rural school there and give out blankets and shoes and books. I think my kids were so overwhelmed and touched by the fact that those kids walked 4 hours to come and receive one blanket, one pair of shoes, and some books. And then my daughter actually went into a corner and started crying. And I was like, why are you crying? And she's like, it is so sad. Like, they walked 4 hours to come and get this, what we take for granted all the time. So anyway, when that happened, it kind of dawned on her that she wants to do something that will help education in India, especially for the girl child, through something that she creates. That's how Tees for Fees came up. So Tees for Fees was just one line that she came up with, saying t-shirts that had cool, empowering slogans on them, and she could sell those and then give the profits to educating girl child in India. That was the way she started the brand. And then when she started thinking about it and we got on board, of course, it became a roller coaster. And then it turned into F5. So we said Tees for Fees is still an integral part of the brand, but it's one of the lines. And we still do the other stuff, which is all 100% sustainable.
I think you're someone who's very bullish, I guess, on sustainable, fashion as something that should be pursued? Obviously your daughter has a passion for it, but just in general, in terms of it having a lot of feasibility in the marketplace. Why do you feel that way about sustainable fashion?
I mean, it's like back in the 80s and the 90s when microwaves were the biggest thing. How many households really use pure microwave technology anymore? We don't, because we figure it has radiation, it causes, cancer, it does a lot of things. I'm just saying sustainability is like that. It's something that every single retailer, company, industry is going to have to look at very closely, because we are kind of killing the planet. So if we don't get our act together, we won't have much of anything left to leave to our generations. So I think right now it's still a buzzword, but I think at some point in the next decade or two, and the UAE is at the forefront of it, right? They had COP28, they did all of that. So I think we just need to understand that it's no longer going to be a buzzword. It's going to become a basic hygiene to at least 80% of the businesses that we do.
Is that something you look for when you're looking for new businesses, local businesses?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think having partners that understand the importance of minimizing their carbon footprint, of minimizing the environmental damage, like one of our partners, Rituals, is a B Corp. And that to me is the standard that everyone should follow. I want our company to be a B Corp, which I'm going to aim towards. But I think having the partners be B Corps in their home countries says magnificently about their vision and their leadership.
So I don't want to just discuss one daughter's project. I also want to talk about the beauty line, NISA. How did that one come together?
So my eldest, who loves beauty and was doing a lot of blogging and vlogging with beauty, we encouraged her. We said, look, if this is your passion, let's do something around it. Do you want to be she of course followed Huda. So she wanted to do what Huda did. So we said, okay, do you want to set up a beauty company? And she thought about it. And actually she said, yeah, I want to set up a beauty platform, but more based on online. So we said, fine, that's the way to go now. So she set up Nessa. And then us being us, we got an opportunity to partner and do a JV with Nykaa. So Nykaa is one of the largest e-commerce beauty platforms, omni-channel actually, from India. And my daughter was super excited that her project is going to get absorbed and become into NISA. So now today it's NISA. So Selena's still a part of the journey, is involved in a lot of the decisions. She's doing her master's as well at McGill with her sister. And at the same time, she still has all eyes on the project itself. And for us, of course, it's putting us in that lucrative beauty and personal care industry that we are now vying for. And I think we can show that what we did with retail, with fashion and footwear, we very well know what to do with beauty as well. So that's going to come along soon.
I'm sure it will. What's it like working with family, right? Because you obviously... You worked for a time, maybe briefly, with your father, and then obviously you worked with your husband as well, in many capacities, and your daughters now. Is there something you feel like? Is it something you encourage? Is it something that you feel like you need to be careful around? Because there's a lot of different viewpoints on it, right?
So I think for me it works as long as there are very clear demarcations of what is yours and what is mine. So in my husband and I, within my husband and I, we're very clear. He does this and I do that. So we don't kind of overlap. We can share an opinion and we can ask if you need my help, but we don't overlap. And I think that's what makes it sane. I think without that, we'd be killing each other. So, because we're both very strong personalities, my poor children. But having said that, with family...
I assume they have pretty strong personalities too.
My middle one does. My eldest, you know how it is with the firstborn, she wants to please everyone. So I think with my firstborn, she's so sweet, so kind, so she lets us push her around a bit. Not that I want her to see this and know that, but okay. But no, I think with children as well, it's a real balance, and it's very tricky to give them a little nudge, but at the same time to encourage them to actually explore what is interesting to them. I don't want them to follow our path. I don't want them to follow our footsteps. I actually said to my middle child, that yes, she's done F5, but I was like, don't come back to retail. Like she's studying right now in McGill. And I was like, don't come back to retail. I think you need to do something different. I don't think retail is going to stay the way it is in the coming decade.
So what are you looking at then? I mean, you mentioned getting into lucrative beauty space. Obviously, you have, I think with Appcore, you have holdings in real estate and fitness and healthcare and all these various areas. What are you looking at then when you're looking at sort of how to expand the business, or even what you're looking at for your children?
I think for the children, I want them to experiment. I want them to actually try out new things. Like when I left my father was all about fashion and not so much footwear. He was about fashion and food, supermarkets, and then he dabbled a bit in malls. He still does. With the children, I want them to try a new industry. I was actually telling them to look at, I don't know, the private charter business, the jet business. I was telling them to look at various things. I was like, there's so much out there that we don't think is accessible to us simply because we don't live in Europe or the States. But I think having that mindset where you can actually say, the world literally is your playground. Choose where you want to play. So I want my kids to have that freedom of thought, and that freedom to say, I don't have to follow what my parents are doing. Because I think that's putting shackles on them, and that's putting shackles on their path and their dreams, which I wouldn't want to do. As far as what we want to do with the different verticals or industries that we want to go to, we literally follow the consumer. So if we have done all the other industries, I think the one that we hadn't dabbled into very seriously was real estate, which is what we're doing now. So my husband's busy developing a property now. So I think that, and also possibly looking at doing malls in the future. And the biggest one on our plate right now is taking Carrefour to India. So I think taking Carrefour to India is a huge step for us.
I mean, it's massive, yeah. I mean, tell me what goes into a deal like that.
What goes into a deal like that is getting strategic partnerships in place on ground. So having been in the Indian landscape now for over 20 years with our retail stores, we understand the country. We, of course, are Indian originally, so we know what goes into making anything successful in India. However, it's very important to have those strategic partnerships in place on ground. He's in India right now, my husband, trying to, validate and check out different real estate, etc., because our aim is to start next year by, I think, the Q3 or summer. So it's not too far away, and there's a
Not at
lot
all.
to be done.
I imagine.
There's a lot to be done.
I feel like there's always a lot to be done. Like, you strike me as someone who's always looking for a new opportunity, a new challenge. Certainly seems like your father had that to an extent, or is similarly motivated. Your daughters already have their sort of initiatives even while they're in college. Do you find you're somebody who's constantly compelled to do something new, to find something new? Do you ever feel like you're doing too much, burned out? I feel like that's always a challenge when you have so much on your plate, and you certainly have a lot.
I think it's all about partially to do with my upbringing. I was exposed to a father who was a visionary but well-grounded. So I think learning how to balance that, where you want to work super hard, but you also want to be grounded and enjoy what you have. I think my kids see it, and there might be some aspects that they like and some that they don't, which I'm fine with. Personally, yes, I don't think I know how to do less. And I don't know how to do nothing. I wish I did. Like, even if I'm sitting on, on the beach in Maldives, I'll be sitting there thinking, should we be doing a hotel? I don't know. Should we be doing food? Should we like, the brain just constantly thinks. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it keeps me, first of all, agile. It keeps me relevant, and it keeps me seeking and learning. And I think what I did learn from one of my life coaching classes was, if you're not growing, you're dying. So to me, if I'm not constantly doing something new or reinventing either my business or myself personally, I feel like I'll disappear or I'll be irrelevant. And who wants to be that?
Well, I don't think you're in any danger of that at the moment. I guess also maybe partially from your father, partially from yourself. I'm curious, Are there any like principles of business, of life that he imparted to you that you carry yourself when you're approaching how deals, opportunities, things of that nature?
I think along the way, I've kind of literally sort of tangled up my husband's and my father's principles and values, which have served us really well, from integrity, honesty, to also always being careful not to break the law. That's something that we have been so mindful of. You can imagine we were working in countries like Russia, Poland, and we are in India. So we have to constantly be mindful not to ever break the law, because that's something, no matter how silly it seems at the time, we just feel our reputation is so much more important than the slight benefit you might get from trying to wiggle your way here and there. So I think integrity, honesty, and always being law abiding.
Is that something that's challenging? Obviously, you operate in 14 different countries. Like, how do you then try to make sure you have the same experience for customers, and also just abide by all the different regulatory frameworks that you have across those 14 countries?
We have an extremely effective, efficient legal team that works through a lot of the nuances for us. However, we actually don't do businesses in countries where we think we can't be who we are. Our values and our morals matter a hell of a lot to us. So we actually pulled out of a lot of countries because we felt the country was not ready to have an entrepreneur or a corporate company that abided by everything that they had written down. So we actually pulled out of those countries.
So then, looking, I guess, broadly at the Apparel Group and AppCore and everything you have on your plate, and I'm sure much more coming, because as you said, you can't stop, right? Brain's always working. What are your big goals, hopes for the next year, for the next 5 years, 10 years? Obviously you mentioned Carrefour in the imminent future, but in general, so where do you want to take it?
I think, like I mentioned about the figures about the F&B space and the beauty space, I do see us doing way more and having way more penetration into those industries. We've just opened Wingstop in Saudi Arabia, and from what I'm seeing, it's phenomenal. The queues are mile long, so that's a great start for us. But we've got many more F&B brands on our table, as well as home brands that we haven't yet ventured into very deeply, which we're going to start. There is a lot out there. So we do need to learn to say no as well to some things, because we do have a tendency to say yes, yes, yes to everything. But we do need to learn to say no as well, which we are trying. Apart from Carrefour, there's F&B, like I said, and there's NISA. NISA has its own expansion plans. I've just opened an aesthetic clinic. But I did that more as a passion project, but it's with Shamal Zabi, who is the daughter of a Salah. So with her, I've opened this first aesthetic clinic, one of many to come in the GCC region. And we think it's about time that women, it's actually a part of my whole women empowerment journey, because I feel like women need to know, and men, that there is a choice. You don't need to follow the same rules and the same regulations of Botox fillers, this, that, whatever. It needs to start from wellness, and it needs to start from your inner beauty. I know people say it and it's a cliched line, but it actually does exist. And I love Sham because she really professes constantly at every conference that she's speaking that it's about your inner beauty first and inner wellness, and then you lead to the outer. So, yeah.
And so, how did that, I guess, passion project get started? So when did you decide, this is something I want to do, maybe for me, right?
So Sham and I were speaking in Saudi at the same Forbes Women's Conference about 2 years ago. And I absolutely loved her on stage. And I think she had the same kind of love for me when she heard me speak. So we kind of got together after the conference. I went to Egypt, saw her clinic, and I loved her ethos. I loved her motto that she says, beauty starts from within. And then she introduced me to her mother and her promise to her mother about keeping her young forever, etc. And everything that she was talking about and that she was doing was so different from what I'd seen dermatologists do here, or even, doctors do here. It wasn't about, oh, you need to fix this, or you need to fix this. It was about literally like what bothers you. Why should it be about what bothers someone else about you? It should be what bothers you. So when you look at the mirror and if there's something you want to fix, fine. But otherwise, she's all about, like, we have this thing called the SO check, which checks you for mineral and vitamin deficiencies and tells you what IV infusions to do. People are going all over the place publicizing, let's do the NAD plus, let's do the Glow one, let's do the energy booster, but you might not need those particular minerals and vitamins unless you've checked for it. So I think having everything start from a scientific basis, where it's based on some kind of a diagnostic tool, and then you decide the next step. That's what's important in the beauty industry now.
Well, I mean, is there something where you feel like this is a message that's getting lost when you're talking about the beauty industry, or when you're talking about, I guess, in general, whether it's for women, or you mentioned obviously for men as well, like there's a tendency with beauty, with a lot of these businesses, to try to make people shop or buy or change themselves, to fit somebody else's standard?
We're cloning people. Have you walked around the mall? Like, literally, when you walk around the mall, you'll see 3 women, friends. Everyone's highlighter is in the same place. The contouring is exactly the same. The nose looks exactly the same. And the lips look exactly the same. Everyone's headed to looking like each other. I'm like thinking God made us different for a reason. So why are we trying to now become exactly like each other, or exactly like someone who we think is on that tabloid cover, or is on that Hollywood Instagram, or that Bollywood Instagram? So I just think accepting the different versions of each other, and then, okay, yes, highlighting the ones you like and probably doing something about the ones you don't, but not to the extent where we start looking like replicas of each other. I think that's where the issue is. For my kids, I wouldn't want them to give up on the features that make them them. I don't want them to take those differentiating features and make them similar to their friends. That's not the point of beauty. So why did we have a saying like beauty is in the eye of the beholder? Why do we pay millions of dollars for Picasso? Have you looked at the Picasso paintings? Like,
they're colorful.
Yeah, exactly. They're colorful. Would you call them beautiful? But people pay millions of dollars because to someone's eye, that is stunning. So I just think Mona Lisa, right? I just think having us become absolute clones of each other will defeat the whole point of being a varied human race. So I think we're in the danger of having everyone look the same if we follow a certain industry's standards about beauty. That's where I have a problem. Like, not everyone wants to be that size or that way just because the beauty industry that is worth billions tells us we should. And every single photo out there, including mine on Instagram, are face apped or smoothened over. So you're never going to have that skin which is poreless and things like that. So we need to be real about these things.
Well, I suppose that's something that, can come with, a lot of the companies and brands you have under the Apparel Group, right? There's opportunity for expression, whether it's through clothing, whether it's through maybe healthier ways of, looking your best, but looking like you. Just as our final remark then, is there any advice you'd give to, both women in business and just people in business, people who are starting on their entrepreneurial journey?
I think my father used to tell me this, that traveling was more important than going to school. Not that I'm saying don't go to school, kids. I'm saying go to school.
Good. I don't want my kids hearing that, no.
I just think that traveling really opens up your eyes, and exposing yourself to different cultures, different mindsets, different nationalities really makes you think differently, and it also pushes you out of your comfort zone. So I think doing something entirely different requires courage. But I think trying to be the same as someone else doesn't work anymore. Individuality is so underrated right now. And I think more and more people want to just keep being someone else. Like, I had Bill Gates at home for breakfast, and the kind of questions that people asked him, like it's amazing to watch this man talk about how he put $500 million into a vaccine in India and there was no result from it, but at least they know that, okay, that doesn't work. So we were all gaping at him. But I'm just saying, if I wanted to be Bill Gates, it would take a whole lifetime to be Bill Gates because I'm not built like him. I don't have his upbringing. I'm not cut out like him. So the same thing, what I'm saying with beauty, it's the same thing in business. Why try to be like someone else? You are who you are for a reason. You have certain strengths. Bring those to the table. And the ones that you need, amplify or supplement them with a great partner. So I think the biggest advice I would be is don't try to be someone else. Be yourself. And then just bring someone else along who can help you do it better.
Well, those are great words to end on. Thank you, Sima, so much for taking the time to be with us on Homegrown DXB. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much for having me.